Good morning, church. This morning I'm going to be talking on 1 Kings 18, 1 to 15. And I'll read that out to us all while you get your own devices and Bibles out. And this I'm reading from the New International Version. After a long time in the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord, and while Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go to the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we not have to kill any of our animals." So they divided the land they were going to cover, Ahab going in one direction, Obadiah in the other. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him and bowed down to the ground and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," he replied. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." "What have I done wrong?" said Obadiah, "that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? For as surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or king where my master has not sent someone to look for you. Whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here.' I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I had 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here.' He will kill me." Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." So this chapter is talking about obedience and servanthood, and actually I really like the children's story this morning. It basically could have been a sermon, really, and it was really well presented. So looking about at obedience, so for any of us who was born pre-1952, we probably would have gone into the army and had territorial training or compulsory training in New Zealand. And for anyone who's lived in the armed services, police, in any of those fields, they know what obedience is, because it's given to as part of your training. And a lot of people today actually don't understand what obedience is. So it's actually to comply with an order or a request or law or submission to another authority. Although we've had a lot of that in the last couple of years around mandates and what's happening with COVID in our land. So going into the story from last week, there was a severe famine in the land carrying on from last week. The widow of Zarephath took in Elijah, feeding him, and his son became ill and died. Elijah carried him up to the upper room, stretched himself over the boy, and cried to the Lord 3 times, "Oh my Lord, let this boy's life return to him." And then he presented this living son back to Zarephath. And so that's really showing, as we ended from last week, the power of God in raising someone from the dead. And the time goes on because it's a 3-year famine, and we're in this timeline of around 863 BC, where kings cover the reign of 20 kings, and only 5 of those 20 kings are reasonably nice or good kings, and Ahab was the most evil of the lot. And so this was 3 years into this drought of 3.5 years. And so that's kind of looking at where we're going next week with David Havel. And so this is kind of a 6-month timeline, you might say. So Jezebel, the wife of Ahab, was running around killing all the prophets, and Obadiah was Ahab's right-hand man. So when we're looking at the scriptures here, and anyone who knows what a drought is like, anyone's been in mid-Canterbury during droughts, Elizabeth probably realises this one, how bad it goes 20, 40 years ago and everything dried up. On the east coast, there's been a lot of droughts in the last few years where there's no feed for stock and nothing grows, and it's quite severe. So some people think of a drought, it's no rain for 3 or 4 months, but they go 3 years, everything's dried and parched. And so that's quite critical, because no food, the animals need food as well. So we're looking at that all the feed's gone, the animals are down to skin and bone already. And then Elijah says, "Look, Ahab says we have to actually go find some water and some grass. So he splits his leader and himself up, and they go in different directions, and away they go. All right, so then we have that the Lord said to Elijah, go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So normally, when you're the high on the hit list and most wanted, it's us as humans would say, hold on, God, you must be joking. Jezebel's killing us all off. Is that a good idea? I could lose my head. Maybe I could today order send a text or a Facebook message or something like that. Send someone else. Because why me? There must be other prophets, but God had called Elijah as his prophet in this time. And a lot have been killed, and we know 100 already in a couple of caves somewhere have been protected. Okay? So it's kind of getting back to the drought. Animals were the wealth at this time. You know, the more animals and sheep and goats and cattle you had, that shows how wealthy you are. So, you know, to have them all kind of die on you is not good for you kind of how wealthy you are. And it could be like us today. We don't have a refinery in New Zealand anymore, and with what's happening in Europe, that all of a sudden we can't get supplies of petrol. And so there's no fuel, and we, after a month or two, have got no fuel to run our cars, and so all of a sudden we lose them, useless. You might as well scrap them. Just try to pull it, like thinking from 800 BC today, how does this story help us survive and work with the Lord today? And so it's so bad that they're really looking desperately now. Okay, so as we move on to slide 2, we have Obadiah walking along, and up popped Elijah. Now, Elijah didn't question God when he was asked to go and do what he wanted to say. He actually just went and did it. That's called obedience. And so, how did Elijah find Obadiah walking along in a desolate landscape just instantly like that? And I'm thinking, well, that back then we didn't have any mission control. We didn't have a radar lock on Obadiah. Sorry, Star Trek fans, Elijah was the first in here with teleportation because he appeared. It's not like you could see him walking towards him in the distance. He just showed up. So it's kind of like he spiritually was brought into the situation in front of Obadiah. And so, and Obadiah recognized and submitted to Elijah by bowing down and confirming, is it really you? And you can think what had been going on in his mind as he said this, you know, kind of because, what's he doing here? My master Ahab is sending out his army hunting for Elijah all over the known world. And they've all come back denying that they knew him or had him in their territory. And then Elijah says in verse 8, go tell your master Elijah is here. And because God was standing up for righteousness, and he did not show any fear. Because at this stage, Jezebel, and Jezebel's a very beautiful woman, by the way, you know, she's probably the most beautiful woman around. She had her FBJ team, not FBI, Federal Bureau of Jezebel, out looking for Elijah because he was top of the hit list. And basically, there was a death warrant on him. And yet he still was going to go and see Ahab. So with Ahab's right-hand man, Obadiah, he would be saying to himself, in verse 9 to 12, he said, what have I done? I will lose my head. You're not supposed to be here, and how do I know you'll still be here because the Spirit of the Lord may carry you away? Ahab will come here, and if you're not here, I'll be killed. So he already realized that God is with Elijah, and the Spirit transports him, and that's what he's afraid of, that he'll just disappear into thin air when he comes back with Ahab. So, and so then he starts in verse 13 to justify himself. Now, I'm thinking of us, you know, when God asks us to do something and we don't feel comfortable about it, you know, we kind of start saying, Lord, I've done this for you. So here, I could say, you know, this is like the right-hand man here. I've been a Christian all my life. He says that. I worship you. I could have led mission trips overseas, taught Bible class, served as a deacon, served as an elder. I'm a good person. I treated my employees well. I've only had one wife. I've given money to good works. You must have heard of all my good deeds. I even saved 100 of the Lord's prophets. And so Obadiah, in his mind, will be having a panic attack, really, because he's thinking, Jezebel could be having his head on the platter and eyeballs for an hors d'oeuvre in the next meal. So it's kind of like he was having a fearful attack over this. And you want me to do what? You tell me to go to a master and say, Elijah is here. He will kill me. So Jack Black knows how to stand up and say, yes, sir. But I'm looking at it like situation today in our society right now. It would be like telling General Valery, and my Russian's not too good, Viv, to go ring up Mr. President Putin and say, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is here. He's coming because he wants to accept your surrender, Russia. That's kind of the reaction that you can imagine would go when he went back to tell his master that, hey, Elijah the prophet wants to see you. And so Elijah came in with a very blunt response. He says in 15, as the Lord God Mighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today. And that's not saying I'll think about it. No matter what happens, I'm going to be doing this. He was speaking under the authority of God to say that. And we look back at verse 9 to Obadiah states to Elijah, he was his servant, and in verse 14, Ahab was his master. So it's interesting that he realized that Elijah was a man of God on God's behalf, and he was God's servant, but also his master was the king Ahab. And Ahab's instructions were, to find Elijah and bring him to me. And that was just like an army order. So we've got Elijah saying in one stage, I'm going to, as an order today, go and see Ahab. And Ahab and Jezebel had also put out an order that they wanted Elijah brought to them as well. Yeah. So what does it mean for us? Because this is an old story. And what does it mean for us now in 2022? See, God calls each of us personally to do specific things for him. And God's call can come with a high relationship of worldly cost. And I know that some in our church over the years have served God and it's been a high cost. So I'm actually going to open up to anyone in their congregation now who in serving God can relate to what that cost was. You can unmute yourself and share. Or you might have even known of other people experienced a high cost, and what happens when you kind of follow God's instructions and obey. Is there anyone that would like to share at this stage? Because next week, Julie about to ask you in the service during or David Havel, and is there anything you want to say kind of around this? So does anyone want to put their hands up? And I can't see the screen, so I have to get my scribe, Angela, to let me know if anyone does. Someone must have had God talk to them in their life and said, God, I want you to do this, and you've gone and done it. Yeah. Well, no, Julie did. That's why she's our minister. Yeah. Was there anyone else in the congregation? I can't see the screen either. Oh, okay. Angela can't see the screen either. I don't know what's going on with her technology. Okay. All right. Well, we're moving forward in reflection. To follow God, we need that personal relationship with him. Elijah had a personal relationship with the Lord. Even Ahab's right-hand man had a personal relationship with the Lord to protect 100 prophets and put them in a cave. But to have that personal relationship, we actually have to have God's heart and passion to actually follow him. And so around that, we actually have to have a relationship where we've asked Jesus into our life. Have we been obedient enough to be baptized? Are we praying regularly with the Lord and asking him what he wants us to do each day? Is he calling us today, any one of us, we need to go on a journey for him, and it could be on the mission field, it could be to help in the community where we are, it could be He wants you to deliver 100 pamphlets to the local church streets around our church, because that's our mission field, and it's predominantly, I would say now, of Eastern background peoples, and it's growing all the time. That covers India, China, all the Eastern Bloc countries. And so, and you know, the Lord loves us all, regardless of where we come from and our background. So, blessed is his name, the Lord Jesus Christ. And so, you know, we have to have that relationship with Jesus that we can bless the Lord and actually open up and say, I love Jesus publicly. And so, we look at Isaiah 43, 6 and 7, where he says, bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth, everyone who's called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. Do we hear him, and do we obey or make excuses or run the other way? So here we have Elijah didn't run the other way. He went off to actually see Ahab. How he got there, we don't know, because it doesn't really specify how he got there, and how in the middle of the desert, in a barren place, he found the right-hand man of Ahab. And obviously we don't know whether the person that had an army with him or just a few people, because it doesn't specify it. But it was a divine appointment in a barren place. And quite often God will meet us when we're in a barren place, and he wants to share important skills, and he has messages for us to do things. So when we're in our most dried out, hard at place in our lives, in the middle of a desert, that's when God can really speak to us. Because also we're getting pretty desperate with him. We're crying out to the Lord, say, Lord, what's going on? I need your assistance. I'm getting dried up and shriveled here myself and around my circumstances. So what I'm sharing today is God has called each one of us in our church for a job, or jobs he wants us to do in the future, and callings. And, you know, are we open to hear that voice? Are we open to, like Elijah, get up and start walking towards it and preparing ourselves? Or are we still sitting on our couch at home thinking about it? Because the church in New Zealand's really been hammered in the last couple of years. I was in a carry meeting on Wednesday night, and 4 of our church actually attended that as well, which was good to see. There was 88 other people in that meeting. And what came out of that meeting is God uses what you've got. It doesn't matter whether you're a Bible scholar or you've got a very simple education. The Lord will use you in this, where you are, to do his will, and he'll equip you, and people will get saved and people will get set free. But we have to actually allow ourselves to step up and step out to do what he wants. So it's really around this whole story. It was around obedience and servanthood. And that's what we're kind of looking at this year as elders moving forward too, around servanthood and our vision. So, which you'll hear about it in a couple of weeks' time. But at this stage, my challenge is to the church, our church, in your own home, in your relationships with your work and your friends and neighbours. God is saying, I want you to share God's love with those people. Will you do it? You might be a good cook, and that's the medium you use. It might be you can be good at fixing cars, and that's the medium you use. But Jesus wants us to go out and preach the good news. And so that's where I'm finishing now with 1 Kings 1:15, because David Havel next week has the good part of sharing the fire and brimstone. So yes, so thank you. I'll hand back to Julie.